Welcome to the second episode of Up in the AI.
And that is the one thing I've learned is I've just trusted my gut more and more and more. And where I've not gone with my gut, I've often regretted that.
Today, we're sailing around the canals of London with some CEOs and founders of 4 amazing legal tech startups.
Technology is not going to be the differentiator. It's the relationships you have, the understanding you have with your customers and the users.
AI, will get as good as it's going to get. Point. It won't really differentiate anymore because everyone's got it.
Think about, rewind back to the start of your first businesses. What advice would you give yourselves now?
An idea is so worthless without the execution. You can have the same idea executed in 20 different ways and 19 of them will fail.
Travis of Jigsaw, Victoria of Springbok, Namdi of Definely, and Dave of Avoca. Today's topic, GenAI and changing business models.
Today, we're talking about generative AI with a bunch of startup founders. So we'll just go around, do a bit of introductions, and then we'll get started.
Awesome. I'm Victoria Albrecht, founder of Springbok AI. We are a generative AI sandbox for law firms and lawyers. We help law firms and lawyers test out and build out their generative AI use cases and de-risk the development of them into client solutions.
I'm Namdi Fonwu. I'm the founder and CEO of Definely. We are a productivity suite to help lawyers create, draft, and review documents really easily.
I'm David, co-founder of Avoca. We're a document automation platform and it helps law firms and in-house legal teams be more efficient in their document creation, negotiation, analytics, and everything in between.
I'm Travis Leon. I'm co-founder and co-CEO at Jigsaw, and we help lawyers and other professionals visualize and create diagrams to help understand complex ideas, concepts, or cases or deals that they're working on. So guys, I've got to know, what's it like being a founder? What are building out your teams? How's it been? You've been there from the start. You got to have some stories. Building out the initial idea, getting your first client, building out the team. What's the journey been like? Obviously, you've had, this is the second time. Well, that's what I was going to say. It's quite different second time around than the first time. First time around was scary, really daunting, but also extremely exciting. So you have this nervous energy every day, not really knowing if what you're going to do is going to mean anything to anybody or whether you're going to be a bit of a laughing stock. You cannot help but worry what everybody's thinking of you because you're taking this, what seems a momentous step of quitting the real world to go off into this potential fairyland of, I'm going to start my own thing, which just sounds like a bit of a dream. Once you've achieved it once, the second time round is a lot more fun. So anyone who hasn't done it a second time round, I would encourage you, if you do finish up with the first one, do it again, and you can really, really appreciate that journey. It's much sweeter. Every day is not a worry about paying your rent. It's about, how cool can this company be? How big can it be? Look at all these amazing people we've hired. It's so great to work with such a fantastic team. So for me, there's been a big contrast between the first and the second. And those people who are thinking about doing it for the first time, I'd also say the biggest barrier is just doing something. Get out and actually try your idea. Try and take that first step, finding someone to help you build it, finding a co-founder. Most people have the idea and they never, ever act on it. I'd say that's 99% of people. Just taking that first step towards making your idea a reality is probably the biggest barrier to most people even getting started. And it's well worth it if you can make it work, in my opinion.
All right. The other thing I'll add is, being a founder is a very lonely world, especially when you start out. You have a vision you're trying to bring to the world, and there's a lot of people who are countering you and telling you that, no, this, for whatever reason, it's not going to work. So you have to have a really strong sort of belief in what it is you're trying to do and the impact that you're going to have. And that can be really, really lonely because oftentimes it feels as though you're sort of battling an uphill, going uphill, trying to push a boulder uphill, which is really, really tough. But I think, as Travis said, if you sort of stick with it and you sort of validate it as much as you can, speak to as many people as you can to validate the ideas you have, that gives you some confidence because, when I started with Definely, it was very important for me to go out there, speak to as many lawyers as I could and just tell them about the idea that I had so that before I did the whole big gesture of quitting, being a lawyer, at Freshfields, I knew that there was a utility for the solution I was trying to bring to the market. So that helps. And I think speaking to as many people as you can, making connections with many other founders as possible to give you, with the ideas, because you're going into unknown territory. You really don't know what you're doing when you first start out. And so when you align yourself with other people who've either gone through a similar journey, or like Travis has been there before, done that before. I actually reached out to Travis when I first started, and him and Steven, his co-founder, gave me really incredible advice. So I think that really helps. Building a community and a network around you really helps as well.
I also know the early times from the fun times, I don't know, is in the pressure in some ways is completely off, I think, when you start, in lots of ways. It's on, but also you've got time, haven't you? You can try things, you see immediate results. You the pressure of kind of having an established product or growing, I don't know, I kind of think back, actually, it is really difficult, but in some ways also you've got no idea as a first time founder what you don't know. And maybe it's a second time, you know what you don't know already, but you kind of almost started with or certainly I think we do, with a bit of a blissful naivety as to what the journey was about to be, and the small wins that you probably celebrate. Actually, I think one of the things that we particularly do badly now is not celebrate the small wins as much as we should do now, where back then it almost like any response to an email was a big like, hey, yeah, so someone's responded, like, yeah, my words, yeah, exactly. So I think, early days are difficult, but I think also you're in a kind of nice, blissful naivety where there's a lot of gains to be made very quickly. I think as you get bigger, I think the ability to make quick, big gains becomes harder in time.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. That.
So I was actually wondering, Travis, is this your second legal tech startup, and did you exit with a large amount of money, or just for some context?
Let's get to know each other a little bit. Didn't even buy me dinner first, Victoria. So the first business was legal tech or
You spoke about it as if you did, so that's why I'm wondering.
It was enough that I probably didn't have to worry about finances so much any longer. This second journey was not about journey. The second company was not about money. And that is actually a really nice position to be in. We're not doing this for the money any longer. The money is a benefit and it's a bonus. And actually in some ways, it's just more of a validation of how well you're doing. It's like in the game of business, how much money you can get for the business shows how well you did.
Your score, yeah.
Kind of, yeah. It's almost a scorecard.
That's okay.
It's more for that than anything else. So it certainly enabled me to be able to relax a bit more, take the emotional pressure out of it, which I didn't even know how much pressure there was until we sold the first one. And I was in this position like, wow, I come from, fairly humble beginnings. I didn't have a lot most of my life, and all of a sudden, I don't really have to worry about my financial situation, possibly ever again. It's a really peculiar change in turn of events for me. But yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily say it was fuck you money, as some people refer to it, but it was certainly like I never have to worry again, and that made things much easier. And actually, for the second time around, I was able to relax a bit more, like you mentioned. But then you also set much larger goals for yourself. I didn't want to do the same thing we just done. It's like, okay, we did that. Next one has to be bigger, better. We want to be outside. Like, we're not just legal anymore. We've moved out into new markets. And that was a big part of why we would embark on this second journey, not to do the same thing again, to do something different, bigger, better, with different people, different industries. That was the whole reason we were willing to go into this sector.
Yeah. Were all of you lawyers and worked in law firms before you started your companies?
Yeah, I was, and I think that I always used to get really jealous of people who, when I was practicing, they really loved their jobs, right? And I knew that I didn't have a natural affinity to the career. I knew that.
You know a lot of people who love their jobs?
Well, a lot of people seem to love their jobs. I just knew I didn't. And it was really.
Some good actors.
Yeah.
That's why I believe them.
And I always sort of sought okay, what is it that I could do that would make me as happy as others seem to be in their day-to-day roles? And for me, I always had this inclination that I was not going to be a lawyer for very long. I remember when I was a trainee solicitor, my first seat, my supervisor was like, "You're not going to be here for very long," because I just didn't have that, natural disposition to it. So I was always quite entrepreneurial minded. I mean, when I qualified, I'm originally from Nigeria. I was born in Nigeria. And I actually went back to Nigeria for the month, and I wanted to try and start an equivalent of Poundland in Africa. Yeah. So I went for the month, going to different markets and buying products. And I went to the market for a week, and I stayed outside trying to sell products to people. I quickly realized that because of the exchange rate, it was never going to work. But I always had that natural sort of affinity towards entrepreneurism, so entrepreneurship. So when the idea for the finally came, I knew I knew that I wasn't going to be a lawyer for much longer. Yeah.
What about you guys?
Ex-lawyer was at Linklaters, and my co-founder Elliot was at Slaughter and May. And yeah, I wouldn't say I think, you know, I didn't hate what I was doing before at all. But I think you're right, as I've been there longer, I've actually seen friends that are still there, and I think the profession starts to take its toll, but different things. But I think you're right, it's an acknowledgement there's things outside, it's exciting to kind of do what we do. Yeah, there's pros and cons, isn't it? There's a job security and the massive salaries that the old life brings, and there's the ability to properly switch your phone off and put it in a drawer when you're on holiday, that, you know, this job doesn't really come with. So I always think, you know, we've got the ultimate flexibility, but also probably the least flexibility in the world, and so on one level.
Yeah.
And what about yourself?
Well, my background is totally different. So I am a technically third-time entrepreneur now with SpringLaw, but I have never had a real job. So I did not have.
Lucky you. Sounds alright.
Well, I've never had the safety net of a salary. I don't know what it's like to get a paycheck every month for years on end that I can depend on to have like stashed away money based on, you know, having worked over time, like, you know, accumulated it over time. Or that fear of quitting a safe job. So like, while I intellectually can understand what you're saying, and like, you know, what many other people say, I can't personally relate to it. My previous business was in the food tech space, was like a market research boutique in the food industry. And then I had a small exit there, never worry about money again, but like could afford to buy like a property. So I didn't have money to then get started with my second business on. I kind of forced myself to start from scratch again. And I would actually say that it was just as hard with the second business.
Really?
But because I went into a totally new market, I didn't know a single person. And it was, I didn't have any.
Can I do the first one as well?
So
You said you did the first one. This is your third one.
Yeah, my first one I shut down again after 4 months. It was a marketplace to help people find flatmates. I was 22 and it was like just something I tried out, and then I realized the market wasn't big enough. So, you know, cut your losses, move on. Totally fine. But with Springbok, so we started almost 7 years ago to this day. Like I think maybe it was 10 days to go or something. And like no capital raised, completely bootstrapped. So that's
To date,
yeah.
Wow.
So
That's unusual.
like a very kind of hard brick by brick journey. With my previous company, we'd like raise money. I felt like I'd made so many mistakes in that first business. Like fundraising was a massive mistake. It like just completely changed the business overnight, changed the dynamic. Like we grew too quickly. We didn't take care of the culture. So I learned so many principles around like what it takes to build a good business, a good team. I learned some of the mistakes, but then also I went to work in my friend's company for a year in conversational AI, like in the LLM space, like early before it was sort of cool and, you know, hot. And that's where I learned a lot of actually how to build a great team and how to be a great manager and how to create a great culture, build a great product, all of those kinds of things. But yeah, so like the way that I arrived at the conclusions that I did or the learnings that I did is a very different journey. And I didn't have, for example, that like investor network because I didn't raise money. It was not like I could go to investors and say, here's this problem, like how would you solve it? We were, I think, the third AI company or the third AI R&D company in London, full stop, in 2017. So we didn't even start in legal tech. We then happened to get Hogan Lovells as a client like relatively early on, and then had more and more legal clients over time. And then, credit to Joe for working with us on was it Fleet AI at Denton's, and then took that to the press. And we kind of around that time had also decided to go kind of specialize in legal tech. But yeah, none of us on the team are lawyers. We get all of our legal insights from our clients and our advisors and our mentors now. But yeah, so I'm always super fascinated to hear the other side of that story.
So it's interesting that all of your current businesses were pre-generative AI, right? It's not like they're post-generative AI. So how would you say that it coming along has actually changed your businesses? Like, have you had to pivot? Do you see it as a massive opportunity, a threat, or what do you reckon?
I'd love to answer that first, which is that for us, initially it was like, oh shit, what's this going to mean? And then the next thought was, wow, these guys are doing our marketing for us. Like, because from one day to the next, AI, like just as a, as a bigger topic, and by virtue of generative AI and it being accessible through ChatGPT, became something that everybody felt like they understood to a degree. And all of a sudden it became, a topic that people wanted to talk about and wanted to engage with. And it was suddenly on the agenda and pretty high up on the agenda. And
law firms had budget specifically for AI.
Exactly. So I think it's been a great thing for the space, and especially just the accessibility of it. And people, for better or for worse, there's a lot of self-proclaimed experts in the space now. That certainly made it interesting. But for all of us who've been there for more than a hot second, I think it's only been like extra tailwind.
So my view on this is that I think overall it is a massive, massive opportunity. Like, it's not like, I remember there was a wave of AI probably about 7 years ago when I first started, and that sort of came and went. I don't think generative AI is going anywhere. I think that there is massive opportunity to leverage that technology, but I will caution it. I think that probably over the last 15 months, I think when it initially started, there was a big phase and just curiosity from people. I think when you're speaking to sort of customers now, law firms, in-house teams, a lot of that excitement is somewhat simmered down. I think like people are not necessarily seeing the true sort of use cases and the true value of it. I think that's still probably a bit further down the line. So I think for us, the way we think about it, it's clearly here to stay. But actually, rather than coming out and just going on the sort of hype of, hey, we are a generative AI first business, we think about speaking with our customers every day and thinking really hard about what real problems can we solve leveraging that technology on our existing solution, as opposed to saying, hey, we're trying to do sort of that first. So for us, definitely a massive, massive opportunity, but it's still sort of, we're still learning, we're still all learning about sort of how we can apply it in a real sort of productive way.
But I'm sure you probably had the same, and I know you as well, but when it came out, I think clients, new shiny thing syndrome, everyone was flocking to it. You had conversations going on for ages about what you do in your core product, and overnight people were suddenly, I think internally resources were stretched, Actually, we've been shipped off every other project that exists because we've got to suddenly try and implement this flash AI thing we've heard about. And I think I think there was a bit of a disruption in the market for quite a while, just the general legal tech sales side, where people just had to think about what was going on. And I'm sure you probably have to answer those questions. Can GenAI not just do what your product does? So so I think there was definitely an education piece that had to kind of go on, and it's still ongoing, to be completely honest. But I think the massive net positive for us has been, I think people are kind of coming out the end of that. They're starting to spot what is good and what it isn't good for. And from a product development point of view, we can build features now that genuinely could take a half an hour to build a feature using generative AI. If we're trying to do it without that, you're kind of talking months and months of development, or something might not even be possible. So I think we've seen, like, we really focused on where we try and implement it, and we've seen some awesome results. But there's still always this education piece thing that's going on that we've seen, and maybe it's the market that we're in, document automation, negotiation, etc. That's just having to help show people what it can and can't do.
And we found exactly what you mentioned there, that everybody was all of a sudden, stop everything, AI everywhere. Are you doing AI? You're not AI? Okay, we need to talk to someone else here.
Project manager, hold off project.
I've got budget for AI. I need to spend it on something AI. So in the end, we had to very quickly, okay, this AI thing, what can we do to make sure that it's going to be able to help our business and that we can be relevant at the moment? Because we didn't know how long this was going to go on for. It has died down, and now people are actually like, okay, how are you helping real problems that we have, not just do you have AI? But it accelerated things we were trying to build exponentially. There was one of our latest products. It's like a computer vision thing, actually, where you can take a picture of a hand-drawn diagram and it converts to a nice digital diagram. We were trying to build that 4 years ago. We spent about $1 million on it, and we got about 70% of the way there. The last 30% we were still trying to hash out. Since AI has accelerated in its sort of technological capacity in the past 12 months, boom, we were able to release it to market. It's far better than we'd even hoped for. And it's now like one of our flagship products, which is flying off the shelves. And actually, if you can build something that is genuinely relevant to the problems that you were already trying to solve, you become not just AI, but you're like practical use AI, because most people are hearing AI, they're buying AI products, and then they're almost looking for a problem to solve with the solution they just bought. Whereas if you're actually just sticking to your problem or surrounding issues around, the problem's there, you can use AI to really help solve that problem, and you're using AI, then it's like a bonus.
I think, and one thing we were talking about earlier on, I think one thing that generative AI has done for the sector as a whole is that, you know, when I first started, you know, definitely, like, legal tech was not really that sexy, let's be honest. Like, you go to and speak to an investor and they're like, legal tech, the vertical just wasn't that appealing to them. Law tech, yeah, law tech wasn't that appealing to them. But I think now, actually, you're seeing a lot more sort of, you know, fundraising announcements. You're seeing a lot more, you know, bigger M&A. You're seeing a lot more interest from investors in this space. And I think what that does for all of us, like everyone involved, startups, all startups in this space, it's actually very exciting because it creates a much bigger sort of a TAM, you know, which is super exciting for us. So I think in that aspect has definitely helped, you know, the law tech space in that sense.
Yeah, but also there's just more like executive buy-in on this topic in the first place. Right, I'm seeing it across so many clients where actually the innovation person is now, you know, even very often in direct reporting line to the CEO. The CEO is super interested in technology, wants to know what's going on. It's core to the strategy of the firm. And so the budget comes from the executive as well. Right? It's not this monopoly play money anymore, which is like, hey, do a nice CSR activity, get yourself a feature in the lawyer if you're lucky, and then we'll reconvene in a year and we'll give you a pat on the back. That is, I think, oftentimes how the innovation function, for better or for worse, was treated within law firms. And now, because generative AI, people understand what it can enable for the future of the firm, it actually has priority on the strategy, you know, in terms of the firm's strategy.
I think it's enhanced the amount of money law firms are willing to spend on technology. So technology has been improving within law firms. People have been investing in innovation teams, knowledge management teams. They've acknowledged there's a need, but I think people seeing how transformative generative AI in particular has been, they're now willing to pile tons more money into it. So the budgets, I think, are growing generally. And we just recently, we had someone say, look, we haven't got budget for efficiency tools any longer, which is where we were going to put Jigsaw. We're out of that budget, but we can put you into the AI budget because now we've got even more money, but it has to be something related to AI. It's actually helped us kiss and sail in that budget, whereas otherwise lost.
Yeah. Well, that was a conversation. It was quite interesting. They were talking about quite hard to prove the ROI on AI tools. No. As in, like, specifically in it, and I'm sure, you know, probably more educated than I am on this, but they were saying it's quite difficult because a lot of them do come with extremely hefty price tags for pure AI tools. And actually, how on earth do you actually check the ROI on those? Because you're not always sure what comes back is accurate. Therefore, how do you know what time is saved? And obviously, I know this thing's getting better, but it was just an interesting one where they were saying people spent a lot of money, and the next wave now is actually going through and, you know, I don't know, Joe, your kind of law firm perspective. Obviously, you don't have to speak to where you are now, but trying to prove the ROI when the checks get bigger maybe becomes also a little bit harder as well.
Yeah, well, I suppose on that I would say it's only really possible to directly show the ROI when it's on a specific bot, specific agent use case that does one thing. And then you can say, well, you know, historically that took 3 hours and now it takes X, or, you know, same time, but actually we can deliver more on a wider data set, high quality, like whatever it is. But yeah, on the ad hoc chatbot, which is usually tens of thousands of users and whatever, that's quite hard.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's obviously value. If no one's questioning there is value in that, it's very popular. And like, often it's like, well, what would the reception be if we took it away? How hard I would also be mad at that. So you've seen budgets increase since AI's come of that? Yeah, well, I think there's like two major drivers in recent years for legal tech. Probably was like COVID, just generally. There was a lot, because a lot of stuff became remote, there was just a lot more demand. And then, yeah, generative AI has certainly elevated like interest in our area to the top, literally the top of the agenda. So yeah, there's just more, we're around of us. Well, there's more, I think people see like such a high potential ceiling.
Yeah.
But yes, it's, you know, it's unlocked more.
Yeah, I would definitely echo what you said a minute ago about
like building actual tools, actual bots and solutions on the platform, as in like in terms of enabling the direct comparison to before and after on a task and looking at the ROI with that. And we see a huge interest for people to build those small bots, those assistants, those tools on SpringLaw, and then be able to, you know, literally compare, okay, that team used to do X, now they do Y, this is the saving. One question I've just been like wondering to myself, and I guess just a bit of curiosity there, some feedback I get a lot from law firms is that, you know, they have a lot of problem with retention, especially if people sort of been there for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, looking to leave, maybe to start a legal tech company like you guys. And so a big piece is actually is retention, but they're not, I haven't seen them quite put generative AI and retention together in the same consideration. So I'm wondering if retention is actually a metric that you're tracking, that you're correlating to generative AI and your usage of generative AI, or if you've seen that across other law firms that use web.
It's still a bit too early. I think it's an interesting point. One thing I would definitely say is that particularly the trainees who do our innovation training scheme, blah blah sub scheme, both probably more like Riga's side because we took a bit older. The trainees with the very best training innovation projects tended to be the ones that ended up at one of the American firms, and you just kind of know that they have been speaking about the amazing things they built as a differentiator for the results. So I think it kind of works both ways, funnily enough. However, our trainees and associates are the biggest user for the vast Scikit tool, and you almost think that they have almost like an allegiance to it in some way. They just love it so much. So like you get even partners, they just kind of talk about it. They're very like such an enthusiastic, like child, what was like a child with a just like a wide-eyed smile. And it's like can evoke emotion in people and interest.
Yeah, I remember when I spoke to Hassan from their team, and he said that the reason that he's able to go and play football after work and actually like do some networking with other lawyers and with potential clients or whatever is because he's now been able to use Sidekick. And there is that the component of as well of like is it. Do we look at just the hardcore ROI of how much is a task taken, how much money does that save, or also how much does that improve the quality of life, and how much joy does that spark back into the job of a lawyer? I mean, do you think you guys might have stayed longer in your careers?
Joe, which was funny about Hassan, right here, this is one of the newly qualified in our firm. So me and him got a quote at the time, which was very nice about the Russell. Yeah, because that's so all right. But then, so in the digital version, the print version, his quote was cut out. He'll love that we're mentioning it. It's actually really hilarious. Like, imagine, because you see yourself in the digital version, you go buy it, and then I'm like, oh great, it's like, well, this is actually. Sorry, go.
No, but my question was, do you think you guys would have left as soon as you did if there was more engagement possible with technology in the firms that you're in?
I mean, personally, yes, I would definitely have left because again, it wasn't really about like combining technology with law. I just, as a whole, the career wasn't for me, so I definitely would have left and sought something more.
I agree, but I think also what's interesting is like, I've got a lot of friends still in the law, and it is funny. I think we have this perception that we're all doing all this great stuff and it's making huge difference to the industry. And I think it is in some ways, but I still think there's a lot of people going to work every day, and if we're being completely honest, doing the job in a very similar way they've been doing it for kind of 10 plus years. I mean, things are changing, but I think just to your point, would that make things different? I think it's still got to take a bit of time until it's, because it gets new a bit quicker, but it's everything else kind of comes with it. So I think I would imagine an engagement from the firm with tech would be a real demotivator if your firm's not doing it.
Yes.
Which has to be, but I do wonder whether it's kind of the thing that would actually keep you around or not.
I was a bit like Nandi. I felt like a caged animal as a lawyer. I was not built to be a lawyer. Yeah, I want to be fun.
Okay.
Actually, I didn't get I missed the deadline to be a fireman.
You're putting out virtual fires.
Yeah.
I tried, and they're like, "Oh, you missed the deadline. You have to wait 1 year." And I was like, "Well, I'll try this whole law school thing, see if I can get in there." Somehow I got in and ended up there, thinking it was a great career path for me, and I was absolutely not built for it. So I always had more of an entrepreneurial streak. It would have made it more bearable, because there's a lot of the things I was doing as a junior lawyer that, for instance, to finally would have been really helpful, would have made my life much easier. Jigsaw, our current company, the product we have would have made our lives easier. It would have made it more bearable, and I think it would never have stopped someone like me, possibly not Nandi either, from leaving to follow a track that better suited us. But there are plenty of others who are in between, friends of mine, who maybe would have stuck it out a bit longer if they had the tools to help make their job more bearable.
I asked because I've recently spoken to a bunch of founders who basically said, I asked my firm whether they can give me the tools to build my idea. I was turned down, so now I'm just doing it on the side, and when I'm ready, I'm going to jump. So it's that thing of, either you make it possible for someone to flourish in your firm, or you're going to have to risk them leaving. So it sounds like you guys were.
I have a friend
back to leave either way.
On a reporter who was told he was allowed to build his thing, and he said he's now made partner. So it's a good example. Yeah, maybe if they'd have said no, maybe he would have left. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
Which one would he be happier in? Who knows? But he's there now.
Yeah, a challenge that I definitely still see in some firms that have allowed people to build out their ideas is the incentive structures around those like tools and product flipping builds. I don't know how you're thinking about that at CRS, if you are already, and maybe that's still a little bit too early.
So yeah, I mean, the main piece of software that we're building, the idea was from one of the councils, and they're incentivized by how it kind of does. So yeah, that option is basically open to either firm.
So you get to use the firm's resources, the safety net staying within the firm, but they get the upside if it does well.
Yes, I mean it's obviously less than like doing it yourself, but like you've got the massive safety net of the development teams, all the resources, the leads from clients, the leads from partners. Sorry, the client relationships. Like there's so many advanced right name, leveraging other lawyers in the department, like build these tools. It's like there's such a huge. I mean, what my view on it is that law firms are already starting to turn into members for like specific things. I don't see them, like doing a defined or like developing like a broad-based AI for like things they know how to do well. I think that we're getting now.
To what extent do you see, Joe, law firms wanting to buy from other law firms? Like, so my personal hypothesis on this is that the mid-tier and very small law firms will want to buy from big law, but will big law want to buy from each other? That's, I think, the big question.
So it's interesting that, I mean, Avail comes from Gowling. That's one of the real estate legal tech tools. Loophole comes from CMS. Like, I think once it's its own thing, but yeah, let's say it was a direct CRS tool and it was branded as such, I think there would probably be a bit of rhetoric to it. It's actually an ongoing discussion.
I think it's the branding, you're right. Yeah. Heavily branded as the law firm's tool, but if it's backed by the law firm, I haven't seen firms be as averse to essentially buying and benefiting another firm as much as I thought they might.
Yeah, and ultimately, the more that you can actually make a tool fit to how you work, instead of it being completely prescriptive, the more that is going to be attractive. Because a firm with a great reputation, obviously the thought process is, well, they have partners who've been there, done that. They figured out like the best way for them and their firm at their practice to do that process. If I need to tweak it based on how I work, I can do that, and then I can benefit from all the software and process stuff and like intelligence that goes on in the background. So I feel like the tweaking and customizing it to how a particular law firm or that practice and that partner works will continue to be key, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing we've not really explored is like, well, apart from you actually, Victoria, you've all been like raising funds, whatever. How do you think that? What's it been like raising pre and post generative AI? There's obviously like are you finding that you're getting demands from potential investors on your activities? Like, is it easier, harder, pre and post Gen AI?
Well, I'm in Victoria's Club, but we haven't raised either, so we're also bootstrapped. No. So we had seed money, about $500,000 angels year one, and then we've also bootstrapped since then. So can't really add a lot to this conversation.
I mean, we raised from angels and considered raising for institutionals before generative AI really came on the scenes. And then we ended up raising, post-generative AI. And we were told the climate was a poor climate to be raising in. And it was also, I think 2021 there was a peak in valuation. There was a lot of VC money flying around. All of a sudden that all constricted. People were holding on to their purse strings a bit tighter, and they were focusing only on companies they really believed in, and a lot of those were focused on AI.
Yeah.
Like AI, again, was just one of these, it was the buzzword that was able to open more doors than if you weren't AI. But what we found actually is they essentially wanted businesses they really believed in, and it wasn't just AI. AI was, if you could frame your products as we can use and benefit from AI. We're not necessarily an AI company. The main thing for them is they wanted a business they believed in. And we found actually they were more scrutinizing of those businesses they didn't think were very good. Whereas 2 years ago, they might have thrown them a bit in cash. Now the concentration of cash was, they were fighting over the few businesses that they thought were good businesses. So for us, we actually found ourselves, it was quite easy to raise. We had a bidding war amongst multiple VCs.
Really?
Yeah, we spoke to all the big ones. I think if you have a solid business, money is not dried up, but they are scrutinizing of businesses they don't think are solid, don't really have some businesses didn't have revenue 5 years ago and were able to raise 20 million. Those days are gone. But if you're revenue driving, there's a path to eventually being profitable and you're solving a real problem with a sizable market. I think there's still plenty of money out there. AI is just, again, it's another helping hand to open a few more doors if you do use that as part of your narrative.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree. We've raised both pre and sort of post generative AI. Solera, we raised from Microsoft in like 2021. And then we raised more recently from Octopus Ventures earlier this year. And I completely agree. I think, there's always going to be money available for good, solid businesses, right? Like financially sound businesses that are growing in revenue and growing in customer base and solving a real problem. And actually, to a certain extent, I think also as a founder, it's your responsibility to actually push back from investors trying to put you in this sort of, place where, they're trying to get you to sort of essentially fit into their world of how they see things, as opposed to the other way around. You're the one who's driving this business. You're the one who's like taking things to market, and you're the one who speaks to the sort of customer and the user every day. And you need to really stick to that, because one of the things that we found when we were speaking to investors, it was almost like they wanted us to like see the world the way they see it, even though they don't really understand sort of our market. They don't know my business as well as I do. They don't know my users as well as I do. I speak to them every day, and they're telling me sort of this is how we see the generative AI world, and this is how it's going to impact law, and this is what we believe. And I'm like, no, you're actually wrong, because when you speak to the end user, we get a completely different sort of sounding from them. So I think, there's always, as Travis said, there's always going to be space for businesses that have solid sort of financials and are growing. Yeah. So
it's good to stick up to those oftentimes well-intentioned but badly informed opinions as well, because I feel that investors are very often glorified and put on a pedestal, but they, in their defense, so to speak, have to juggle across whatever 6 to 10 different industries. They know a little bit about everything, but I mean, I don't know about you guys, having worked in potentially other sectors, or what those sales cycles are like, but my God, legal is slow.
Your comment.
And you can't expect the same rates of growth as you would in other markets. You can't expect the same sales cycles or accelerations as you would in other markets. There's just more compliance to start with, right? So an investor that doesn't understand even that from the get-go, like, to me, is more of a red flag.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You find it more the UK European investors.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a niche topic, but the European investors come across as much more educated professionals trying to look from the outside in. In the US, the VCs are much more ex-founders and people have actually been in it and experienced it. I found that a lot. They're much easier to deal with. They kind of get it and they've been there and done that.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a...
No, and it's actually a very good point. And we were talking about this earlier on. I think, and they both well-intentioned and well-meaning, right? I just think they see it from completely two different perspectives. I think a European VC is trying to maximize for a very good, solid business, like with good foundations, that's going to be there in the next sort of 10, 15, 20 years, right? Whereas I feel like a US VC is like they're trying to take advantage of an opportunity now, here, today, So I think that, and ultimately they both want the same thing. They want to sort of create sort of outsized outcomes eventually, but I just think they see it from a completely different sort of lens. And European VCs tend to be a lot more conservative, with valuations, with the amount of money they think you need, like with everything. Whereas, historically, you've always heard about a US sort of entrepreneur going into a VC meeting and with an idea and a napkin and coming out with like 20 million, for their seed round, right? It's just a historic thing you see. And I think when you speak to US VCs, you sort of get that inkling, you get that inclination that they're a lot more like, they're a lot more willing to be sold a dream, as opposed to you get European VCs where it's like, okay, what does the numbers look like, and how let's look at the finances and the numbers more. Yeah.
Joe, what does a law firm? I mean, you've worked in several over the past years. How do you look at time horizons for your investments, and like by when you expect returns to some degree on any products you're building or investments that you make, so to speak?
So we're also building our own software currently. I would say that from start to finish is like probably a 2-year journey to even like start to think about income, like just building and, you know, getting a version 1 out the door. So I mean, that is like, you know, aside from the other stuff that we do in terms of with GenAI and implementation for lawyers and LPM and process improvement and everything else, that's like, I feel a little bit like a very early version of you guys, for like very like startup-y in the butt. In terms of our like purchases, I'd probably say like a quite quick, you know, value realization. But I think, well, you know, well, as it happens, all of the firms here are clients of CRS.
But just from a philosophical point of view, right? Like, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you have an idea, you have a vision, and you want to bring that vision to the world. And your hope is that people want to use that because you want to create value for people, right? So I think one of the things that generative AI has done, because of the interest that people now have, with technology as a result of generative AI, I think it's more realistic now. It becomes more realistic that actually you could get to a world where 100% of the firm is potentially using your software, as opposed to 5 years ago, where it's like actually lawyers are very slow in adopting technology. They're very disinterested in it, you know, and things like that. I think generative AI sort of removes a lot of those hurdles and makes it a world now where you're like, actually, this idea that I had in my head that I brought to the world because I wanted to create something that would help people is actually genuinely doing what it was meant to do, which is quite exciting.
But you know why, like, the lawyers are so interested in now? It's like their kids are coming to them going, this is helping with my home. Okay, I need to know what this is. And then clients are coming going, oh, you know about this generative AI thing? What are you doing with it? How are you using it? How, you know, are you using it for my work? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
Yeah, are you going to save me money?
That's I don't know. So all of a sudden, like, there's awareness and pressure to engage, whereas before there was neither awareness nor pressure to engage, right?
Absolutely.
Like, that's been really the big shift.
Yeah. I mean, it's not about saving money. I mean, Joe, what do you think to the extent that the billable hour? I don't think I get bogged down, but like the whole conversation on ROI, saving money, saving time. How much do you think that still occasionally falls on deaf ears? Because actually, you've got people who are making millions a year, super successful, thinking, why on earth would I save time? I know it's not as simple as that, but I still think that's one of the hardest nuts to actually crack when you bill by time. And why would someone always want to spend less time doing it?
There's a lot of firms, like we part of our partner conference, a lot of our partner conferences was talking about use of AI, value-based billing, moving to different kinds of models. And so like there's a lot of talk internally about, you know, different ways. And I think there actually is no silver bullet. It's like literally on a like almost a partner by partner basis, up with like different ways, different kind of value based.
You've always got to assume the net positive effect is good enough and they make more money. Because I think sometimes when you actually want to pitch an ROI, as in like the ROI of saving X amount of time, how is that actually enabling you to make? I know, yeah.
The clearest way that a lawyer recently said it to me was, we're not looking to reduce billable hours, we're looking to reduce all the non-billable hours.
Yeah, I guess written off.
Right? Yeah. So exactly, the hours that get written off, and like that's pretty clear. It's hours you're working that you can't bill. Nobody likes those. Cool.
There's also the qualitative benefit.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, the better on better. Yeah, live reality.
The clients are happier,
Quicker turnaround times, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah, happier lawyers, better retention, and better talent attraction. If you're not going to do it, your competitor does, then you're going to lose that client. So it's very short-termistic. Keep billing as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
I think those are. It's a lot of reasons.
No, I agree.
It's hard to just narrow it down to one thing.
And especially when some partners are slightly more short-term incentivized, because actually often people maybe make decisions actually, maybe thinking I'm retiring in kind of 5 years. Do I kind of care? So I think it's just a really interesting dynamic to almost think, you kind of think that actually these tools should make people so much more profitable, because you can deliver the same for 20% of the output. But I think unless we kind of help people get a bit creative in how we end up passing down or billing it, there's always going to be that slight.
Yeah.
We definitely don't see that. Often it's the more experienced partners who are the ones like banging it the loudest. 100%. So we definitely don't see that.
So one interesting example to address exactly what you just said. One of the firms that we work with, they actually see their use of SpringLaw as being a way to particularly tie in or engage the most senior partners who are about to leave the firm, or those that are on, what do you call it, like contractor basis, sort of refusing to give up, to, wanting to continue to stay engaged and involved. And so those lawyers are at the end of their career to the point where they're like, I don't really have anything to prove to anyone anymore. I'm just actually at this point wanting to leave a legacy. And so then the firm is thinking about, okay, how do we enable these people to leave a legacy and to actually get a small kickback from that product or that tool or whatever when it's then sold by the rest of our team or leveraged internally for the rest of their team. So it's I think it's a great way to have people not just fob that idea off, but actually really engage with it and think of their life beyond being a full-time lawyer in a very, very different way, to kind of capture the essence of what they were doing and turn that into products.
Yeah. One thing I always wondered, and this is a slightly off topic, is there has been, because again of the influx of or the rise of generative AI and the interest in it, there's been an influx of legal tech companies, startups over the last 2 years. Like every day you hear of a new sort of company doing this. Like, as a firm, how do you guys sort between the noise and the signal and the noise and differentiate it into that and choose which candidates?
Yeah. Well, do you know what, actually, you wouldn't believe the combination between my LinkedIn inbox and my actual inbox and my voicemails is mad. I would say probably about 5 companies a day contacting, and that's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot. And actually,
Just cold outreach to you.
yeah, literally.
Wow.
It's unprecedented.
Do you read those? Do you go through them?
Listen, well, usually
I will read. Trying to do
Does this work?
I mean, there have been some cold outreaches before that, where we've actually now used the product and we had to figure out it.
Make noise if you.
Could it get busy? It's the thing is that we look for extra differentiation over and above what we've already got, and sometimes legitimately there is, and therefore we'll have a look at it. I'd say that there's a lot of quite generic generative AI tools. I might even put SpringLaw in that bracket, but you still have to have one or maybe more. But what you don't really need is the Fergal, for example. So what's it going to do for you that you don't already have?
Yeah.
And I think as we see more specific use cases where we can't build our own or partner with a system provider, that I think we will. But actually, at the moment, we've got a couple of pilots on, but I'd say the quantity of pilots we've done over the last few years already been slightly constant, even though there's been a lot more pumping it, because we only have so much capacity.
Yeah.
That's it.
So, I was speaking to a founder this morning about where we see the market going, and what we see bad investments or not bad, but risky investments versus safer investments to be. And one of the things that came up was the question about whether point solutions are at risk of just being replaced by more generalist solutions becoming better and better. I would love to hear your perspectives on that.
Well, I can be interesting. We've actually recently released for the first time a point solution. So we have a generic solution. It's a general document automation platform. But a couple of months ago, we also released a very targeted ability to produce lots of documents en masse for a use case that was actually one of our most popular use cases in our generic tools. It's been quite an interesting kind of, and actually what we've seen there's been pros and cons to each, but we have actually seen that the point solution, you've got the ability to move incredibly quick with a point solution, because you're solving, it's obvious, we're referring to a specific point. And somebody answered your question about will it be replaced, but I think
maybe to reframe, I think what you've done is you've created, maybe there's some similarities there to SpringLaw, which is you've kind of built, from what I understand, a tool to build tools.
Kind of, yeah.
Or the building blocks to build something more specific. And so you have the leverage of the infrastructure, and also then you own the specific thing.
Yeah, I think, in a way.
As opposed to your only proposition being the specific tool.
Yeah, I think in a way that maybe that's helped us build it easier, but I do think it's been interesting, the sales cycle of looking at it from the specific tool has been interesting comparative. I guess obviously the more users you're after, the bigger the thing you're solving, the more scrutiny, the more people get involved, more kind of people you touch in the cycle. But a very point solution I find has been quite interesting, that it's almost had a very kind of laser focused microscope by a handful of individuals, but you're kind of in your lane and you're not, so it's been an interesting kind of piece. And my general thoughts on where AI gets you and will it swallow point solutions is you're always going to have some great UI behind whatever solution you build. So I think ultimately AI, will get as good as it's going to get. And to be honest, at some point, it won't be the differentiator anymore because everyone's got it. So it'll be about how can you make the user journey the best as possible, know their pain points, because ultimately everyone's AI is going to let them do everything they want to 5 years from now. So kind of, I think if you've got a really good solution and it brings a journey along the way, I kind of think that can be your differentiator.
I think there's a few things. So Define actually started as a point solution, right? And actually, if you think about the typical way to start a business, you start with something very narrow, very specific, solving a very specific use case, and you expand on that. And this is exactly what we've done over the last sort of 4 to 5 years. So I think the differentiator is not going to be technology, right? It's going to be the fact that over the last 4 years, we've now got over 100 customers, tens of thousands of users. We've been used on millions of documents every year, right? And we are getting a lot of data from all of this, right? We're speaking to our customers every day. We're sort of involving them in sort of the way we build up our roadmap. We're getting feedback from them. We're seeing how they're using the tool, and it allows us to build a much more sophisticated platform, which is what we have now. So I think GenAI is not going to do that overnight, right? They don't have, yes, they have the technology, but technology is not going to be the differentiator. It's the relationships you have, the understanding you have with your customers and the users, and those sort of things are the things that people probably, I think, don't pay attention to as much. They think it's just going to be technology. Technology can solve anything. With enough money and enough time, you can build anything, but that's typically not always the differentiator. It's the more softer things like those customer relationships and the data you have.
Yeah, but I don't think it removes your moat, though, defensibility, though, for sure. I mean, there's stuff that, as I've been to your point before about the kind of taking the photo, there's stuff that, could have taken ages to build, but in reality, if anyone spends half an hour doing a prompt, they can have very similar functionality. So I think it is interesting that it helps you catapult yourself into the future, but actually, depending on what feature you're talking about, it can mean that actually it's not as defensible as things once were. Your engineering team could be literally one person, a prompt, and your existing back end, and you could build something that would have taken a huge amount 2 years ago.
That's where you differentiate. Comes into your knowledge, your knowledge of the problem. And there are a lot of generalist tools out there, and especially in law, in legal, whichever way we want to frame it. Lawyers think they do a very specific job in a certain way, and no one really understands what they do. And they like to feel they have that power and understanding. If you come at them like, hey, I understand exactly what you do, and we have something specifically built for you, they love that. And then also law firms themselves like to be supported. They need a lot of hand-holding sometimes, and they want the back end. Once you sell the product, it's not like, here you go,
there we go.
Run away with it. You want to have to provide training, you want to provide support materials. Someone has to be there when the law firm has a problem or a question or a query. Those generalist tools, I don't think are willing to commit, particularly to the world of legal, to the degree that I think would be needed to really win over those clients. Like, I think a number of us are probably doing.
For sure. It's going back to the customization conversation that we had earlier, if you can't refine and customize something to work for someone's particular workflow and make it useful to their documents, like it's not going to be useful. And I think both some of the general solutions on the market and also some of the point solutions are very guilty of that. Of being like too descriptive. Basically, there's like too descriptive and too general. And the sweet spot where the future is going is in being helpful enough to get started with, but customizable enough to make it really specific to how someone works,
I think some of the general tools, we're being honest, legal's just not a big enough market for them. It's massive enough for all of us, but if you look at something like DocuSign, I don't know how many billion a year their turnover is, yet actually if you speak to lawyers, there's a lot of things actually they built an e-signature from scratch. They might change to help on large-scale transactions, but ultimately, DocuSign is selling to every single person in the world, and legal is like the tiniest slither of the tiniest market to someone as big as that. So I think sometimes, we maybe overestimate the size of the market when looking at the whole world, but then flip that around. Actually, it's still a huge market when you're selling to it. So I think it's
our competitors, PowerPoint. Microsoft are not going to turn their hand and say, can we make PowerPoint way better for lawyers? That bet, we're willing to do that.
Yeah.
So
it's fascinating, isn't it? Because the legal market is worth $1 trillion probably, and it's really interesting that there aren't that. In the grand scheme of things, if you compare to other sectors, other industries, there aren't that many unicorn businesses that have come out of legal purely, and I don't think those businesses are going to be, as you say, like a DocuSign or Microsoft. I think it's going to be solutions like us that start from within the sector and expand our offering. I think that those are the businesses that are going to be the real big sort of winners in the next sort of 5-10 years, as opposed to Microsoft or DocuSign trying to come into legal and
it's harder to solve the complex first and then simplify. I think, than kind of go the other way. It's more painful, but at least you've done that top tier, then you can kind of start to branch out and widen out, I think. But it is, yeah, it's, I mean, super interesting kind of, conversation to think about, people using general tools they've got at the moment. We've heard that within firms. Again, I don't know what you think, Joe, there's been a lot, there's starting to get a lot more pressure, there's more money everywhere, but also people are saying, do we need another tool in our tech stack? Do we need one more thing? Or actually what can we use at the moment that can do a good enough job for that? Might not be as good as something else, but there does seem to be a bit of that going on as well.
For that, I'd say that's where we're at now, which is like, we think our portfolio is like kind of there for like most of the business problems. And for the bits that we don't have, then either we'll be looking to partner with, and like literally we have with most of you, but actually all of you, partnered on new features or BG products, and I literally name it. I think that the other alternative is to like do a little bit of robotics, a bit of RPA plus a GenAI. I know actually solve quite a lot of the very niche stuff. So as I said, we've got a couple of extra pilots, but actually I think that once you have a well-rounded portfolio, you should be able to like turn it lots of ways.
Something that I've seen you approach in a much more open way than a lot of the rest of the market is talking about use cases. And I'm again kind of wondering what your perspective and your philosophy on this is. But certainly I've been to a lot of conferences where there's just so much caginess to talk about how they're thinking about generative AI, what they're using it for, what they're thinking about building. And I think all of us as founders would agree that it's like an idea is so worthless without the execution. And you can have the same idea executed in 20 different ways and 19 of them will fail and one of them could do well. It really, really, really comes down to the execution. And when I was speaking to you and your colleagues, you guys aren't protective of your ideas or what you're using it for. Yeah. And clearly you found ways to leverage it for you. Like, how are you?
Would I say I actually push myself to be more open and talk about use cases, because if you do that, then that the next time you speak, you have to be able to also say something new. In order to say something new, you have to have done something, right? And then otherwise you're just stuck, I won't say anything, and therefore I can just kind of get through it. But actually, and that pushes you to like keep it fresh, which I think is like a good, just like talented.
But it's refreshing, I think, isn't it? Like, because actually, it's one of those powerful things you can get, I think, is a case study with a client. I think one of the difficulties, certainly early on, is people use it on client matters. They're not sure whether the client's happy about using it, how they feel about learning about stuff. So I think, it's amazing when I think firms are so open about helping promote the fact that they've used tech in a really positive way.
The thing with GenAI is that like when you reach a stage of like so many use cases, it's actually hard to know what people are using for. Like I can tell you in general terms. But like you can't, we tell people that we don't, but reading 26,000 threads, a month, it's like completely impossible. Like, how are you going to do it? So so now we're getting the AI to tell us a summary or like you've got 25 different categories of like what that chat is about. So then we know, so it's a bank, they're using it for these three things. The partners, corporate, they're actually using it for these. So I think, using the technology to help encourage its own use. So like, one of the things we've done with you guys is like the auto push, the auto nudge, how now you like encourage the tool to like almost help itself. Yeah. Right, so one last bit. Okay, so the last bit is as follows. Think about like, rewind back to like the start, or like your first businesses. What advice would you give yourselves now?
I think stick it through. Like I remember, so when I left Freshfields, probably like everyone, probably other than you, Victoria, because you say you've never actually worked for anybody, but you leave this really big hefty salary at the time, and you're like, oh my gosh, you can't relax. And I'm, and I was living, in, renting a place, by myself at the Olympic Village, which is like a pretty nice part of London. And then I left my old firm thinking I'd saved enough to last me 9 months. It lasted me like 2 months. So I ran out of money very, very quickly. And so I had to go back and move back to my parents' house. So I started like, I think I was like 31 years old. So I was like 31 years old, had to move back to my parents' house. I thought I was gonna be in my parents' house for like 6 months. I was there for 4 years, right? I didn't take a salary for 3 years. right? So during that period, it was a very, very difficult period because I was like taking the bus everywhere, and like it was just like very different to my previous life. And it was very easy to be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you even doing this to yourself? Like, a lawyer's not that bad a career. Like, at least, you know, there's stability, you sort of know where you're going to end up there if you do X amount. So it's very, very easy to quit in those sort of scenarios when you're not seeing much value, like instant value from what it is you're trying to build. But obviously over time, things have changed and things do get better. So I would just say, yeah, it gets very, very difficult. And I think anything good, you have to go through, like, people always talk about like when you like jump out of a plane, like you never just like, the parachute doesn't just open, you have to drop first and then it opens and then you sail up. So I think you have to get comfortable that things will get much worse before it gets better, but ultimately it will get better if you stay the course. So yeah, stay the course.
I think I would say the three things are hiring the right people. It's so key. Like the fundamental core team is what defines your culture for the rest of the organization. And if you do that too quickly, you can't do that properly. And it's just been so instrumental for us at Springbok. You know, we have 100% of our management team has been there for the past 4 years. Our three co-founders, like, we're still there for the entire time of the organization. Our average retention is like 2.5 years, including people that have joined in like the last year and a half. You know, over the course of 7 years, like, that's quite good, especially in the tech sector. And that was definitely something I didn't pay enough attention to in my first business. So that's number one. The second one is, I would say to myself, get mentors earlier. I think for a long time, I just had this sort of pride of, you know, I can figure it out myself and I don't need anyone to help me. And that was totally wrong. I wish that I had just asked for help sooner. And actually, when you ask for help, people are oftentimes really willing to help and happy to help. And the third one is just like that relentless optimism that you have to bring to the table every single day. It ultimately becomes around managing your own psychology. And like the biggest difference from like my past year and a half has been getting a daily gym routine in. Like, I cannot live without the gym anymore now. And that is like part of just me taking care of my mental health and making sure that like I'm taken care of so that I can take care of like our customers, our team, the company, our strategy, that I have a clear head. So those would probably be the three biggest things that I would give myself as advice. My younger self.
I mean, yeah, but I'm trying a similar theme. I think, you know, it's going to take longer than you think. It's going to be harder than you think. And, you know, you probably...
We want to know that. I don't know if that would be helpful.
No, I think for an expectation management setting, I think is helpful. I mean, but I think, take the point, actually, going from week to week, not knowing how long it's going to take, I think is possibly helpful. But I think that resilience, I think the thing you've got to realise is it's harder than you never expect it to be. And I think the resilience, to your point, that, you know, the relentless optimism every single day, you've got to have that. And even if it's not for you, it's for everyone else, because actually, as you get bigger, you get different problems, and then you need to be that relentless optimist, perhaps, for everyone else as well. So I think just be resilient and kind of trust your instincts, I think, as well. I think a lot of people try and give you advice, and it's learning about which advice is good advice and which is bad advice. There's a lot of bad advice out there from people who don't know what they're talking about.
Meaning, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, resilience seems like a very common theme.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. Like, what would I go back and tell myself to have done things differently? I don't think I would have done a lot differently, actually. The one thing I considered is moving faster. We were quite slow to start off because it was our first business. We were very tentative. We didn't have a lot of confidence in what we were doing, whether it would be anything, whether it would amount to anything, whether people would really want it. So we moved quite slowly. I think we could have moved more quickly if we'd have been a bit bolder, had a bit more confidence. But that also probably would have required fundraising earlier on. That might have changed the business. I don't know sometimes that can change things for the worse. So I'm not sure I would have changed that, but I think I just have to align with particularly what you just said. People give a lot of advice, and it's choosing who to say no to and which advice to ignore, which is probably the hardest thing. Because you'll sometimes speak to very smart, very established, very educated, professional people, but they're not from your world. They've not done this, but they will give you advice which sounds to them obviously as good advice, and it comes across as sensible sometimes and logical. You have to go with your gut.
Yeah.
And that is the one thing I've learned, is I've just trusted my gut more and more and more. It's been validated time and time again that rationale, logic, advice from others has never really, I can't think of many scenarios where that's trumped what I actually felt inside. And where I've not gone with my gut, I've often regretted that. So that's probably the one thing I would just tell myself, could go with my gut and be confident about it.
Well, no, I was just going to say thank you all for coming on the boat. It's been amazing. There's been so much that you've all shared and we've all learned, and hopefully the listeners will agree that this has been very valuable. So big thank you from CRS and Legal Tech Tips. Thanks. Cheers, everyone. Cheers.